Okay, so hello my dear students. So welcome to our first video lecture for ACC 321. No, so for week 1 to 3, particularly Uloa, we shall be discussing the basic concept of succession. Okay, so to start with, no, so let's discuss na. Of course, the topic is the introduction to transfer taxes. Okay, so transfer tax is a tax imposed on gratuitous transfer of property ownership. Okay, so when we say gratuitous, no, um, wala siyang consideration, no? Kasi pwede tayong maka-acquire ng property through onerous transfer or gratuitous transfer. So, yung onerous transfer, yun yung may consideration. Okay? But when we say gratuitous, wala siyang consideration. Okay? So, it is a privilege tax which is imposed on the act of passing ownership of property and not a tax on the property itself. You should remember that a a transfer tax, may it be a donor's tax or state tax, is not a property tax. It is a tax on the right, no, of passing ownership of property. Okay? Yan. So, the transfer of ownership may take effect during the lifetime in the case of gift tax or donation inter vivos. So gift tax is a donor's tax, okay? Or upon death of a person in a case of state tax or mortis causa. Okay? So, ito yung difference between the two, okay? So, when we say donor's tax or yung transfer is inter vivos, mean kasi nag-take effect yung transfer during the lifetime, meaning buhay pa yung donor. Okay? Okay, kasi during the lifetime man siya, okay, of the donor. Yung mortis causa naman, or which is subject to state tax, is mag-take effect siya, no, upon death, no, of the donor. Okay? So it's is subject to state tax. Okay? So state tax and donor's tax are the two transfer taxes under our laws and is defined in the National Internal Revenue Code as, yun nga, state tax, which is an excise tax. So again, excise tax siya, it's because it is a tax imposed upon the right of transmitting property at the time of death. Okay? And the privilege of controlling the disposition of one's property to take effect upon death. Okay? So, as what I've said kanina, ang donation mortis causa or mag-take effect siya upon death. That's why it's subject to state tax. Okay? Yung donor's tax naman, which is a tax on the privilege of transmitting one's property to another during his lifetime. Meaning to say, mag-take effect siya during the lifetime of the donor, okay, without adequate and full valuable consideration or gratuitous transfer siya, walang consideration. Okay. So, it's subject to donor's tax. Okay? So, yung parang transfer of property na mag-take effect upon death is subject to state tax, while yung transfer of one's property na mag-take effect during the lifetime of the donor is subject to donor's tax. Now, let's discuss the basic concept of succession. Okay, so succession is a mode of acquisition by virtue of which the property, rights, and obligation to the extent of the value of the inheritance of a person are transmitted through his death. Okay? Meaning kasi yung succession is subject to state tax. Kasi 'di ba, mag-take effect man siya or matransmit siya upon death. Okay? To another or others by will, okay, or by operation of law. Okay. So, what are the elements of succession? First is the decedent. Okay? So, the decedent is the general term applied to persons whose property is transmitted through succession, no? Whether testamentary meaning he left a will, okay, intestate meaning to say that is the decedent does not left a will, so wala siyang will na ginawa, walang last will and testament, or mixed, meaning both testamentary and intestate succession. Okay, so if the decedent left a will, okay, so ang tawag sa kanya is testator. Okay, so ang heir naman, okay, yung heir, yung the person called to the succession either by the provision of a will or by operation of law. Okay, so yun siya. So si heir yung mag-succeed ng property. Okay, so si decedent, no? Si decedent yung may property, of course. Then yung mag-succeed ng property niya is yung heir. Okay? Ang state naman, of course, this refers to all the property, rights, and obligation of a person which are not extinguished upon his death. Okay, so these are the three elements of succession. Meaning to say, may decedent, no? Of course, si decedent dapat may state, okay? May property siya, rights and obligation, no? Now, of course, it will be na i-succeed siya ng heir. Okay, so these are the three elements: decedent, heir, and estate. So what are the kinds of succession? Although medyo na-discuss ko yan kanina pag-discuss ko sa decedent. Okay, so kinds of succession, these are testamentary, no? It results from the designation of an heir, no, made in a will executed in the form, no, prescribed by law. No, kasi a person can, of course, can specify the property or the recipient of his properties upon death. No, so this designation must be made through a written document. So ang tawag doon is the last will and testament. Okay. So if a person died with a will, that means to say that the person died testate. Yan. Or yun nga, diba, ang tawag sa kanya is testator. Legal or intestate succession naman, these are transmission of properties, no? Where there is no will, or kung may will man, such last will and testament is void or lost its validity, or nobody succeeds the will. Okay, for example, nag-prepare ng last will and testament, no? Si testator. Then of course, mas nauna pa namatay yung na-include sa last will and testament kasi kay testator. So, yun nga. So, nobody na succeeds the will. So, ang mangyari, ang i-follow is legal or intestate succession. Okay. So, next would be a mixed succession. Yun. So, it is a transmission of properties, no? Which is affected by partly by will, partly by operation of law. Yan. Say for example, di lahat ng property na include sa last will and testament. So, yung properties na na-include sa last will and testament, of course, should follow the last will and testament. But for those property naman na hindi na-include sa last will and testament, ang i-follow niya is yun, legal or intestate succession. Okay? Okay, so who are the persons authorized to manage the state? Okay, kasi there is a time lag kasi between pag-transfer ng property, no, from the decedent to the heir, no? So during that time, sino yung dapat mag-manage or mag-administer ng property, no? So we have the executor. So executor is the person nominated by the testator to carry out the directions and request in the decedent's will and to dispose his property according to the decedent's testamentary provisions after his death. Meaning to say, si executor is appointed, no, by the testator. Okay, yun siya. So, si administrator naman or administratrix is the person appointed by the court in accordance with the governing statute to administer and settle intestate estate and such testate estate as no competent executor designated by the testator. So, ang kaibahan lang ng dalawa is that si executor that is appointed by the testator or nominated by the testator. However, in absence of the executor, um, si court naman, pwede siya mag-appoint. Diba? So, pag ang nag-appoint ay si court, ang tawag doon is administrator. Okay, yun siya. Okay, so we'll proceed to further discuss a testamentary succession. So, as what I've said kanina, yung testamentary succession is that which results from the designation of an heir made in a will executed in the form prescribed by the law. So, of course, ang will is an act whereby a person is permitted with the formalities required by the law to control to a certain degree the disposition of his state to take effect after his death. From the moment of the death of the decedent, the rights to the succession are transmitted and the possession of the hereditary property is deemed transmitted to the heir. Okay? So, yun siya. So, what are the kinds of wills? Okay? So, yun yung kind ng will. Okay, so we have a notarial will, no? So it's one which executed in accordance with the formalities prescribed in Article 804 to Article 808 of the New Civil Code. So it is a will that is created for the testator by a third party, usually his lawyer, follows proper form, signed and dated in front of this is required number of witnesses. So 3 or more witnesses and acknowledged by the presence of a notary public. So in summary, it is a notarized will signed by the decedent and the witnesses. Okay? So we have holographic will naman. So holographic will is a written will which must be entirely written, dated, and signed by the hand of the testator himself without any witnesses without any necessity of any witnesses, no? Or witness. So this kind of will does not need formalities because many people can recognize his handwriting. Dapat ma-verify na handwriting yun ni testator and it can be verified by a penmanship expert. Okay, so in summary, it is a will which is entirely written, dated, and signed by the hand of the testator himself. Okay? So yung codicil naman is a supplement. This is supplement or addition to a will made after the execution of a will and annex to be taken as part thereof, by which any disposition made in the original, which is explained, so meaning like changes, no, sa original will, which is explained, added, or altered. We also have kinds of successor. So kind of successor in a testamentary succession. Okay? So we say legatee, an heir of personal property. Yan. Yung derived naman is an heir of real property. So yung difference ng dalawa is sa legatee, ang ma-receive niya is personal property, and si derived naman, ang ma-receive niya is real property. Okay? So under the testamentary succession, properties left by the decedent are classified into first the legitimate portion and the free portion. So yung legitimate, ito yung portion of the testator's property which could not be disposed freely because the law has reserved it for the compulsory heirs. So kasi parang the law identifies certain persons which is designated as the compulsory heirs, no? So yung legitimate is a portion nga ng testator's property na hindi niya pwede ibigay sa others. It's because the law reserved it for the compulsory heirs, okay? So yung free portion naman, okay, para siyang residual, no? Kasi may specific part ng property, no, portion of the property na dapat nasa legitime. Okay? So, after the legitime is the free portion. It is the part of the whole state which the testator could dispose of freely through a written will irrespective of his relationship to the recipient. Okay? So, sino man yung compulsory heirs? Okay? So, the compulsory heirs are the legitimate children and descendants, which include legally adopted children. Okay? So, in the absence of legitimate descendants, the legitimate parents or ascendants, the surviving spouse, and then the illegitimate child, both natural and spurious. Okay, so normally gina-classify into yung compulsory heirs into primary, secondary, and concurring heirs. So, yung primary heirs are yung legitimate children and their descendants and their direct descendants. Okay, yung concurring heirs naman, that's the surviving spouse and the illegitimate descendants. And then yung secondary heirs is the legitimate legitimate parents, no, or ascendants. Okay, so since in the absence daw of legitimate descendants, no, so meaning to say si legitimate parents or ascendants maka-receive lang sila if walang descendants. Okay, meaning to say if maka-receive lang si parent pag walang anak si decedent. Okay? So may ano lang siya, may legitimate. Meaning to say walang legitimate si parent or ascendants pag si testator is my legitimate descendants. Okay, so parang normally, no, ang maka-receive lang, ang may share lang sa hereditary state is yung legitimate children, no, and si surviving spouse or illegitimate child, okay? So, in absence of legitimate children and descendants, ang maka-receive na or may share sa hereditary state is yung legitimate parents, surviving spouse, and the illegitimate children. Okay? Kasi, as I've said kanina, maka-share lang sa legitimate si parents or ascendants if wala ang decedent. Walang legitimate children or descendants. Pero, pwede maka-receive sa free portion ang parents or ascendants. It's just that hindi siya part sa legitimate. Okay? Yan. So, in the absence of compulsory heirs, the successors would be, yan, kung walang compulsory heirs, meaning walang legitimate children, walang parents, walang surviving spouse, walang legitimate children. So, the successors would be relatives up to the 5th degree of consanguinity. Yan. So, later on, we'll discuss how to determine, no, yung degree of consanguinity. And then, if there were no relatives, the government shall inherit the whole estate. And if there is a will, the decedent may name or other persons to inherit the free portion of the net distributable estate. Yan. So, meaning kung walang compulsory heirs, the rest are free portion. Okay? Yan. So, the table below explains the legitimate of the compulsory heirs. So, ito siya. So, if my legitimate children, my surviving spouse, my illegitimate children, yan. No, so ang share would be 1/2 for the legitimate children, then or descendants. Then so even if my parents or ascendants excluded siya sa legitimate. Okay. And then yung surviving spouse is same as legitimate of same as the legitimate of a legitimate child. Okay? And then, yung ano naman, illegitimate is 1/2 of the legitimate of a legitimate child. Okay? Okay, so ang rule nito, if isa lang yung anak, um, isa lang yung anak niya, di ba half ng property is mapupunta, or ang share na legitimate sa legitimate children, or child, kasi isa lang, is 1/2. And then half nun, is share ni spouse. Then, free portion. So, if more than one yung anak, or legitimate children, no, 1/2 of the entire state is sa children, legitimate children. Then, yung 1/2 i-divide siya kung i-divide siya of how many children does the testator have. Yun siya. So, if dalawa, divide 2. If tatlo, divide 3. So, yung share ng so yung half of the hereditary state is nasa legitimate children. Tapos, i-divide mo siya if how many children. Then, ang share ng each child, equal yon, equal siya sa equal ang share ng surviving spouse sa share ng one child, or each child. Yan. So the rest will be free portion. Okay? So sa letter B naman, so if walang legitimate children, yan, 'di ba? So as what I've said kanina, makashare lang si parents sa legitimate if walang legitimate children or descendant. So, in this case kasi, wala siyang surviving spouse, then wala din siyang legitimate children. So, kay parent is 1/2, then if free portion is 1/2. Okay? Yan. So, again, yung free portion is yung part ng hereditary state na freely disposed ni testator. So, sa C naman, so, what if still walang legitimate descendants, may parents, may spouse, tsaka walang illegitimate children. Yan. So, mangyari 1/2 sa parent, 1/4 sa spouse, then 1/4 sa free portion. Okay? So, parang si free portion is residual. Okay? Then, dito naman, walang anak, walang parents, and then walang illegitimate children. Yan. So, ito siya. Wala sila anak, no? So, 1/2 sa spouse, then 1/2 sa free portion. Ito naman, sa letter E, walang anak, walang parents, may surviving spouse, illegitimate children, and tsaka free. Lang siya, may surviving spouse, may illegitimate children. Okay, so the distribution of the hereditary state is that 1/3 sa spouse, 1/3 sa illegitimate children, and the rest will be free portion. Yan. Okay, so let's have another example. Let's have an example. No? So what if ito, 1/5 yung hereditary state? Yung survivors niya, or yung mga compulsory heir niya, may legitimate child, isa lang yung anak niya, may parents, buhay pa yung parents niya, tsaka may spouse. Okay, so the distribution of the state is, yun siya. So, since isa lang yung anak, so yung share ng anak niya is, 1/2 of the hereditary state. So, 750. Then, ang share ng so, ito yung na-explain nyo kanina, no? Ito siya na rule, mag-apply lang siya if more than one yung anak. Okay? Kasi if isa lang yung anak, kasi dapat kasi may free portion, no? Kasi kung i-follow natin to, na same as yung legitimate ng surviving spouse is same sa legitimate of each child, wala nang free portion kasi 750 yung kay legitimate child, 750 yung kay spouse. So, wala nang free portion. But kasi dapat may free portion. So, as I rule, basta isa lang yung anak, um, yung share ng legitimate child na 750, half lang ang mapunta kay spouse, saka half kay free portion. Okay, so I hope I made it clear. Sa second example naman, okay, ito siya. So, the hereditary estate is 1.5 million. Okay, the survivors are the legitimate children, dalawa. My parent, tsaka sa my spouse. Okay, so as a rule, diba, half of the hereditary estate is mapunta sa legitimate children, which is 1/2, so 750. Since dalawa man yung anak, so each child may share na 375. Tama? And then, of course, kay parents walang share kasi may descendants man. So, dito na mag-follow yung rule na yung share ng surviving spouse is equal to the share of each legitimate child. Okay, so meaning to say 750 for the legitimate children, 375 for the spouse, and the free portion is 375. Okay, next, ito other example. The hereditary estate is 1,500,000. The survivors are tatlong legitimate children, parents, and spouse. So, still, same kanina, no? Walang ma-receive sa parent. And then, since tatlo yung children niya, so half of the hereditary estate, which is 750, i-divide mo ng 3. So, meaning to say, 250 ang share na each child. Then, ang share din ng surviving spouse is equal sa share ng each child. So, 250. So, 750 plus 250, then yung hereditary estate is 1.5 man. So, the free portion is 500,000. Okay? And then, we have the other example. So, hereditary estate is 1.5 million. The survivors are legitimate children, dalawa, may illegitimate child, may parent, tsaka may spouse. So, same. Walang ma-receive si parent kasi may descendants. So, since dalawa yung anak, so, 750 divide 2. So, 750 kasi half of the hereditary estate. 750 divide 2. So, 375, diba? Ang rule is that ang share ng legitimate child is 1/2 of the share of each legitimate child. So, since ang share ng legitimate child is 375,000, so half nun ang share ng legitimate child. Okay? So, spouse naman is, of course, equal siya to the share of each legitimate child. So, the free portion is 1.5 million minus 750,000 minus 187,500 minus 375. Okay? So, meaning yung free portion mag-vary siya. Basta yung free portion is remainder. Yan. Okay. So, for number 5, example, hereditary estate natin is 1,500,000. Survivors are the parents. Okay, the parents. And, walang parent na yung survivor. So, the rules that 1/2 sa parent is 1/2 din sa free portion. Ito, ang survivor niya is ang parent and ang spouse. Okay, so, ang rule, 1/2 sa parent, then 1/2, 1/2, 1/2. Diba? 1/2 sa parent, 1/2 sa parent, 1/4, 1/4 rather. So, 1/2 sa parents, 1/4 sa spouse, and 1/4 is free portion. Okay, number 7. Ito, example. Survivor is the spouse. So, 1/2 sa spouse, 1/2 sa free portion. Okay, for number 8 naman, the hereditary estate is 1.5 million. Then my illegitimate children or illegitimate child, then my spouse. So ang rule, one half sa illegitimate child, 1/3 sa illegitimate child, 1/3 sa spouse, and 1/3 sa free portion. Okay? Yan siya. So, uh, um, this is the end of the part 1 of our discussion for um, week 1 to week 3 Uloa. Okay? So, I'll have another lecture for the or second part of Uloa. So, thank you everyone.